Thank you all for showing up today, taking time out of your lives to be here. We are going to cover macronutrients. So by a show of hands, who's heard of macronutrients before? So almost everybody in this room. Okay, who's tracked them? Track them. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit into macronutrients, what they are, what they do for our bodies, how to track them. We're going to go through a few demonstrations. Sure. And the fans too?
That switch is going to cut the TV off.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I tried it already.
Uh-oh.
Trying to get rid of it.
If it helps, you can have a seat there too. Okay. All right, so here we go. So what are macronutrients? Macronutrients are pretty much what we need in terms of nutrition on a large scale. So you'll probably heard of macronutrients. There's also micronutrients. Micronutrients we don't need in as large of a scale, hence the name micronutrients. Now, our macronutrients can pretty much be boiled down into three subcategories. We've got our carbs, we've got our fats, and we've got our proteins. Now, normally when we're eating our macronutrients, we'll also be getting our micronutrients together. Most cases, not every case. And a lot of times, a lot of our foods will have a little bit of each macro and micronutrient. So our carbs will sometimes be mixed in with our fats, mixed in with our proteins and things like that. Okay? Adding up all of our macronutrients contributes to our overall calorie goal or our calorie number, okay? And we'll dive a little bit more into that a little later down. So, carbohydrates, what are they? This is our body's primary energy source, okay? So, it provides our body with energy as well as fiber. And there's actually a couple of subcategories for carbohydrates here. So we have our simple carbs and we have our complex carbs. Now with our complex carbs, they're going to have a little bit more fiber. They're going to offer our bodies a little more time to digest, so they don't spike our blood glucose levels as quickly as, say, simple carbs would. And we'll go over those on the next slide, a couple of different examples of those. And again, our body uses these carbohydrates as a form of energy, okay? I'll get you a couple of handouts. So, a few of our different carbohydrate examples for our complex. We've got quinoa, we've got sweet potato, we've got lentils, brown rice. If you see a little something reoccurring between those is that they are very fibrous. They have a lot of fiber in them. Whereas our simple carbs are going to be things like candy, sugar, syrups. Those don't offer as much fiber, which, enables that to get to our bloodstream a little more quickly. But we want a majority of our carbohydrates to come from those complex carbs. You're welcome. Now, a fun fact about carbs. So because carbs are the first thing our body uses for energy, if our reserves are exhausted, then our bodies will go for the fats. So it doesn't sort of pick and choose, hey, I want to use fats today, or hey, I want to use carbs today. It will exhaust our carb reserves, and then it will go into our fat reserves. Now, the same thing goes in the opposite direction. The carbs, once the body needs, or excess carbs beyond what the body needs for immediate energy is converted into glycogen, which is a form of storage for our body, okay? And what's not converted in terms of carbs will then be converted into fats. Those fats then get stored inside of our cells, okay? Bear with me. Now for fats. So we kind of covered carbs. We went into a little bit of carbs. Now we're going to go into fats. Fats are going to be our most energy-rich macronutrient. Carbs have about 4 calories per gram. Fats have about 9. Okay, so more than double in terms of energy. Our body uses this to build cell membranes, nerve tissues, and help with hormone regulation, okay? So we need fats. We need healthy fats. We can also use this as fuel. And again, if fats are eaten or they're not used for energy, they're then stored. So with fats, we also have a few different kinds of fats. We have trans fats, we have saturated fats, and we have unsaturated. Saturated fats tend to stay solid. So think of things like butter, okay? We all know butter. It's going to be a little bit more dense. Whereas our unsaturated fats are things like olive oil, okay? We want to lean more towards those unsaturated fats because there's a less chance that those things can clog our arteries. So going towards things like those olive oils and things like that as opposed to the butters will give you a little bit of variation. Now, trans fats are actually man-made. So we take liquid fats and we turn them into solid through a process called hydrogenation, which is man-made. And our body has a really, really tough time breaking these down, okay? So if you ever see trans fats on your food labels or anywhere on that item, just know that thing has gone through a process in order to get that fat in there, okay? This is very commonly known as things like margarine, right? We've all heard of that before. So that's going to be an example of our trans fats. A couple of examples, we've got olive oil, we've got butter, nuts, seeds, peanut butter, avocado. Now proteins. So we covered carbs, we've covered fats. Now we're going to dive into a little bit of our proteins. So what are they? Proteins are made up of building blocks called amino acids. We've probably all heard of like BCAAs, branched chain aminos. So there's actually 20 different kinds of amino acids. And out of those, our body can only synthesize or create so many. 9 of them we have to get from our foods. And so to do that, we have to eat it, we have to drink it, we have to ingest it outside of our body itself, okay? So if you've heard of those essential amino acids, those are the 9 that they're talking about. If we don't have all of those amino acids, it can be really hard to make those proteins, okay? Now, how does our body use them? We use them to rebuild and repair muscle, bones, hormones. We create hormones with protein, enzymes, and we can use them as an energy source. Now, these are very familiar or very similar to carbohydrates in the sense that per gram, it's also about 4 calories, okay? Whereas the fats, they were 9. All right? Common examples, we've got chicken, beef, tofu, turkey. All right, so we've learned what they are. Now we're going to talk a little bit more of the practical side, okay? So how to track. Now, there's a few different ways we can track. We can write it in a journal. We can keep it logged in some kind of app. I've listed a few up here. So MyFitnessPal is probably one of the most popular, most well-known out there. They have a huge database. You can enter pretty much anything into their search engine, and you'd be surprised at what people have actually logged in the past, okay? So you can use any one of those resources to track, but essentially just getting that down on paper, getting it down somewhere, okay? If you were to use MyFitnessPal, you can actually link that to your Northwest Fitness Company app, and that way you don't have to enter it over here and then enter it over there, and then you're entering all day long, okay? Makes it really convenient. It just links right up, okay? All right, so there's a couple of things that we need to be successful when tracking, all right? The first being a food scale. So this is probably the most accurate because you can weigh just about anything. Fluids, liquid, regular food, hard food, soft food, doesn't really matter. You can pretty much measure anything with a scale. Now, coming down from that, maybe we don't have a scale, you can use measuring cups. It will be a little trickier because not everything can fit inside of a measuring cup, but you can do your best, right? Now, if you want to be a STAR student, you would have both your scales and your measuring cups to be able to measure and be as precise and accurate as possible. Now, say you don't have any of that. We run into these issues where we're out with friends, we're, at parties or whatever the case may be, and we just we didn't bring our measuring stuff, right? So you can use your hand, okay, as just a general guideline. Now, we all have different size hands. This is not the end all. This is not to say that your hand is exactly this much. But again, it gives you a sense of accountability, tracking, staying on top of what it is that you are consuming, okay? So to give you an idea, the top of your fingertip would be roughly about a teaspoon, whereas the top of your thumb tip, a tablespoon, your full thumb, 2 tablespoons, your palm about 3 ounces, fist about a cup, and then a cupped hand, a half a cup, okay? Now, how to calculate? We kind of went over what they are, what they do. So the first thing I usually recommend is figuring out what your intake needs are. Everyone has different intake needs depending on your age, your height, your body fat percentage, your activity levels. If you work from home, if you work out in construction, those will all be considerations for how much energy it is that you need, okay? So decide on your needs. If you don't know, you can always go through MyFitnessPal, go through a few of the questions, and it'll sort of give you a ballpark understanding as to where you might want to be at. It may not be 100%, but that's where we go and sort of do a little trial and error. You can also use this link I put up here, calculator.net. It'll ask you about your activity levels, your age, all of that information to just kind of help you figure out what that looks like. Or you can ask your trainer, okay? Now, once you've decided that, you want to sort of decide on your macronutrient ratios. So I have some people that are really leaning towards a keto sort of diet. They want a lot more higher fats. And then I have a few people that would like it a little more moderate. Decide on your ratios, and that's something that you can do on your own or again with your trainer to figure out what it is that you need. Now, you got to start tracking. We got to start doing it, right? We won't know until we start doing it. And then once you start doing it, I would say on a bi-weekly to a monthly basis, you can sort of see how that's working for you. So based on your biofeedback, are you feeling lethargic? Are you feeling full of energy? Are you feeling hungry? How you're sleeping? All of those factors can change what we need to do with your macronutrients, okay? All right, so this is getting into a little bit more of the math side. If you're using an app, you don't have to calculate this. The app will do it for you. But it gives you kind of a full circle understanding as to what's actually happening. So for example, we'll go over carbs. If carbs are 40% of your daily intake, and you've decided you're going to eat about 2,000 calories for that day, that would equal to about 800 calories. Recall on that first slide, per gram, carbs are about 4 calories. So you would divide that by 4, and that would equal to 200 grams for the day. Okay? It's a little mathy, but again, if you are using an app, it will calculate that for you. Okay? Now, how to meet your needs. Depending on your ranges, you may need to increase certain areas. A lot of times we are low on our protein, and so we always are honing on get that protein up, get the protein up. It could also be that we need to play with the carbohydrates a little bit, that main source of energy, right? So just depending on what your needs are, normally what I do, especially with my clients when we are first starting out, is I'll say pick a food that you really like, right? Let's say tacos, for example. You want to enter these in individually, all right? So I would enter in the tortilla. I would enter in the meat. I would enter in the condiments. Now, depending on what your needs are, you would play with the ratios of those ingredients, all right? So if you know you needed more protein, I would put the amount of protein that I needed and say I needed a little extra, maybe I take an extra scoop for the side of the protein, okay? Now, if I noticed, okay, I've eaten a good amount of my carbs for the day and I don't have many carbs left, maybe we ditch the tortillas and make it into like a taco salad, right? So something that can work for what it is that you want to eat. We don't have to make entirely different meals to meet those needs, okay? Now, I'm not so worried about the lettuce. I'm not worried about the tomatoes. People are like, but I didn't add in that 10 grams of tomatoes. That's not going to make or break you. It's the sour cream. Okay, it's the cheese. It's the stuff that has the dense sort of energy, those extra calories that I'm more worried about. Okay, those are the things that we want to pay attention to. You can try increasing or decreasing, again, based off of your goals. All right, so I hope you all have been paying attention. We're going to do a little quiz. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you a few different images, and you're going to decide if it's 1, a carb, 2, a fat, or 3, a protein. And you're just going to lift your hand based off of what you think. Okay, so you're going to give it a vote. All right, here we go. So 1 carb, 2 fat, 3 protein. All right, by a show of hands, what do we think this is? Carb is 1, fat is 2, protein is 3. All right, I'm seeing a lot of 1s. You guys are right. You got it. That's a carbohydrate, and that's mainly a carbohydrate, okay? Mainly a carbohydrate. You won't find a whole lot of fat in this. A lot of it's in the carbs. You're not going to find a whole lot of protein in these. Okay. All right. What do we think this is? What do we think this is? All right. Votes are in. It's also a carbohydrate, okay? Carbohydrates come in many different variations and versions, our fruits and our vegetables, but most of those will be carbohydrates. All right. What's that? What's that? Is it a carb? Is it a fat? Is it a protein? Remember, number 2 is going to be fat. Number 3 is protein. Okay. That's going to be a fat, okay? Now, for anyone paying close attention, do we remember if this was a saturated or unsaturated fat? Unsaturated. Unsaturated, correct, correct. All right, what is this one? Not the stuff in the back, the main pieces in the front. Okay, okay. So I put it down as a protein, but if you said it was a fat, you'd also be correct. Okay, these do have a pretty higher fat content in terms of macronutrient value. All right. And our last one. Oh wait, second to last one. We should definitely get this one. And are we saturated or unsaturated? Saturated. All right, this is the little bit of a tricky one. It's a 5. So you got it. So cheese is going to offer you both a fat and a protein, and they're almost a 1-to-1 in terms of like their ratios. Okay, so they're also a really great source of calcium. Get your calcium in. All right, so I have a few commonly asked questions. I'm going to go over these, and then if you guys have questions for me, I'd love to answer them. All right, so the first one, do I have to track forever? The answer is no. You don't have to do anything. But if you do want to get a better understanding and a better idea of what it is that you're eating and the things that you're putting into your body, tracking is a good place to start. It'll teach you about serving sizes. It'll teach you about where your food is coming from and the things that it can offer you. Okay? What if I don't know what's in it? So do you remember when I was talking about using our hands to sort of gauge how much it is that we're eating? That would be a good way to sort of do that trick if you don't know what's in it. You can always, as you're eating it, sort of, okay, what's it? There's maybe some corn in here. There's a little rice in here. Mentally kind of keeping track of the things that you're eating. It's never going to be perfect. Okay, there's always going to be a little bit of variation, but if you can, again, just be mindful of what it is that you're putting in, that's better than nothing at all. All right. Now, what happens if I go over? A lot of times people tell me, oh, well, I had this big event and I went over like 1,000 calories. Do I just subtract that tomorrow? No, definitely not, especially if you're already eating really low calories, right? That's going to be like practically nothing the next day. Now, if it is a smaller portion, like maybe 200 to 300 calories, yeah, you might be able to get away with that the next day. But I would not, absolutely not, just subtract that surplus the next day, okay? You can add a little extra cardio, but definitely still focus on your nutrition and getting everything it is that you need. All right, the last one is 20 grams of chicken, 20 grams of protein. No, it's not. It actually takes 87 grams, okay, in order to get those 20 grams of protein. But imagine if it was a 1-to-1 gram. We would all be right on track with our protein goals, okay? All right, so common mistakes. When people come to me and they're like, Sarah, I'm not seeing progress. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Help me. Here's a few things. So not being honest and not being super accurate with your tracking. If you put in, oh, I think that was about 3 ounces, I think. It could be like 5 ounces or 6 ounces, almost double what you thought that it was, right? And same thing to go with our carbohydrates, especially if we're just kind of eyeball parking or measuring with our heart, there's a chance that, you know, maybe it isn't actually what we thought. Okay? Not being consistent. If you're tracking Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, next Saturday, how do we know what's happening, right? Like, how do we know? But if you are consistent, then we can sort of figure out where those holes are. What is needing to be changed? What does need a little attention, okay? All right. And we got to give it enough time. We have to be patient with our bodies, okay? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time. But little bits every day add up to the bigger picture. All right? It doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to be consistent. All right. We've made it to our demonstration, okay? So we're good to go there. Now for our demonstration, I brought a couple of things. We're going to be making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, okay? Now, what I brought with me is a digital scale. You guys can find this. I got mine at Walmart. You can get it from Target. You can buy it off of Amazon. It's very simple, very straightforward. I think it cost me no more than $15, okay? And there's ones that are even less and even more, okay? So just depending on what your needs are, something like this is just very simple and very easy way for you to start tracking. Now, on the scale, you'll see a couple of different numbers. So there's normally a mode, and then there's a tare and power button. For the mode, I typically like to stay in grams. Grams is really easy for me. A lot of times grams are what is listed on the food labels itself. But if you find measuring in cups or in tablespoons is a lot easier, feel free to do that. These things have all different kinds of modes and functions, okay? So I'm going to show you a little tip and trick that I use when I am doing measurements and things like that. So that way you guys can take these tips and tricks and use them on your own journeys, okay? So, all right, so the first things first, we've got our bread, okay? Really simple thing about bread is a lot of times it's already sliced, okay? And it's already sliced and it's already measured. You don't have to necessarily measure anything. With this, all I would do is I would look for this specific brand and as close as I can to that specific type, right? So if it's a rye, if it's a white bread, if it's a wheat bread, that's what I'm gonna be looking for, okay? And then when I'm scanning it in, so MyFitnessPal has a feature where you can just scan the barcode. It used to be free. It's no longer, okay? So it's in addition to their monthly thing that you would pay for. But if you are very serious about your journey and your tracking, it can be a good investment, okay? So you can, it is free? So if you change your time zone to another country, it sounds like it is free. Those features will be free. So we're learning all kinds of things today. Thank you. So I would look to see how accurate I can get to it, right? If I can't scan it, what I'm looking for is if I can get as close as I can to the calorie, as close as I can to the carb, the fats, the proteins, right? Then we're going to take that and we're just going to see, okay, one slice is 40 grams. Now, if you're using a loaf like sourdough, sometimes the pieces can be really small and then really big, right? Depending on where in the loaf you're using. In that sense, I would weigh it out because I want it to measure as closely to that 40 grams as possible. All right? Because you may be thinking, oh, the one on the end, well, that one's 40 grams, and this one in the center, that one's 40 grams. It says it. It says one slice, right? But it's not really. We got to hold ourselves accountable to that, okay? So we'll grab our 2 slices of bread here. Each one of these slices being roughly 110 calories. Now, for measuring, this is my favorite part. So a lot of times people will measure and they'll put it into some kind of container on the scale, and then they'll transfer from the container onto their slice of bread, right? It's a whole lot of dishes that we don't want to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to pop the top off of whatever it is that you're using. This can be Greek yogurt. This can be jelly. This can be peanut butter, whatever it is. It can even be a can of nuts, right? But you're going to look for your serving size. So for this one, it's 19 grams. I'm going to turn on my scale, and I'm going to switch to the grams mode. All right. All right, I'm on grams. With everything on top, it's 343 grams. From here, I'm going to tare it, so it's completely 0. Now, I'm going to scoop 19 grams out of there and go right onto my sandwich, okay? We just took out all of the extra dishes. And that trick can be used, again, for a can of nuts, a thing of yogurt, whatever it is that you're having to measure out of a container, okay? If you're cooking, instead of scooping, putting here, putting there, you can go right into your dish on the stove, okay? So we're going to go 19 grams. Now, before you go ahead and put it on your thing, you want to make sure that you're close to 19 grams, right? That's 16, so I'm good. That's 19, right on the dot. Boom. All right, so our jelly is measured. That's 1 serving. Now, if you find that you don't have enough carbs in your macros to be able to do a full serving, that's okay. You can do a half a serving of jelly, or maybe take out a slice of toast and just fold your bread in half, sort of like a hot dog would, okay? Now, same thing for our peanut butter. We're going to take it, place it down, zero it out, and for this one, 32 grams. 32 grams, okay? But again, if you need to go more, you need to go less, you can always decide that with how much of that serving size you need. All right, so we're going to go 32 grams. $25. All right, that's about 33 grams. Now, it doesn't have to be like, if you are slightly over by 1 to maybe 3 grams, that's not going to make or break you, okay? If you're over by like 10, 15, 20 grams, yeah, we've got a whole new number now, okay? So that's pretty much it for my presentation today. If you guys did not get one of those handouts, I have them up here along with our sign-in sheet. Okay, so make sure you sign up to get your points. Does anyone have any questions before I? Yes. cooked, it has different. So to clarify, she asked, when I'm measuring like meat specifically, right? It weighs one thing raw and it weighs a completely other thing cooked, right? Same thing with rice, same thing with oats, same thing with a lot of different foods. Now, my suggestion is if you're gonna measure your food raw or uncooked, let that be your standard every time, okay? You're gonna go off of that standard of uncooked every time. If your standard is measuring once it's cooked, you're gonna do that every time, right? We need that consistency. But if one day you're measuring raw, and then you're measuring cooked, and then you're measuring uncooked, there's so much discrepancy. Again, you're not quite sure what is happening, right? So we want to try and minimize those variables as much as possible. So me personally, I always go cooked. Always go cooked.
Let's say chicken breast, right? When you're measuring 3.5 ounces of cooked chicken breast,
Yes.
it goes to 25 ounces of protein, versus if it was 3.5 ounces uncooked chicken breast,
So
less.
it's a lot less. It's a lot less. And so what I find is once we cook it, a lot of the fats will come out, but then also a lot of the water. A lot of the water will come out of what it is that we're cooking. And so it loses essentially that water. I will always, especially with meats, measure them already cooked because I want to get as precise as I can.
But in my fitness pal, they have raw
And
they have
cooked.
too. So make sure you
are choosing the right one. Yeah. So
have a chicken breast cooked, and that has a protein versus
then
chicken breast.
raw. And then you'll find too that if you are measuring uncooked, you don't need as much. So like you, in terms of volume, if we go 3.5 ounces of chicken breast versus cooked, you're going to have a lot more once it is cooked, because again, it's sort of losing that water in the process of cooking. Okay, so if you are going to go uncooked, make sure in the app that you are choosing uncooked, and the same thing goes with rice, oatmeal. Okay. Yes.
Okay, I find the box terribly confusing.
Okay.
It's a 2-ounce serving, but I don't cook 2 ounces of dry. I cook what I'm going to cook for dinner, but how do I find out what is a serving after? Is it still 2 ounces?
So if it's saying on the label 2 ounces dry, what I typically, it doesn't say if it's cooked or dry? So in that sense, I will normally go 2 ounces cooked. I would measure out 2 ounces cooked. And sometimes the labels will specify, like especially on dry goods, it'll say cooked or it'll say dry. And you can always do a simple Google search to see if there is a discrepancy. If you're trying to lose weight, always go for the one with less, right? If you're trying to gain weight, go for the one with a little bit more. Okay, so if you're absolutely unsure, go for the one that has a larger portion. Okay. Any other questions? All right, you guys have been great today. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you all coming and learning about macros, and I hope you learned something new today.